The greatest games of all time. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, Grand Theft Auto 4, Peggle 2. There are a few games out there that have a legendary status. Perhaps they completely changed the industry upon release, inspiring a new generation of creators and players. Or maybe they were just really good. There's one of these types of games that, despite its constant unyielding praise, I've somehow let slip under the radar. And that game is, of course... Wait, 7? I haven't played the first 6. Do I need to play those first to understand the story? Ah! Final Fantasy VII is one of those games that I've heard nothing but endless praise for. I'd hear whispers of a gripping world and engaging battle system, but for some reason it always just skipped me. I was more of an N64 guy, and although I did have a PS1 for a short while, all those games sucked and looked like ass. No thank you. But I began to wonder, how would this classic play today? I feel like I am in a super unique position where I can both look back at this 25-year-old classic and its legacy whilst also experiencing it all for the very first time with a great pair of fresh, unbiased eyes. So kick back and relax, because today we're going to do a deep dive into the legend game changer of a game that is Square's 1997 JRPG hit, Final Fantasy VII. And what better place to start with than the... Going into this game, I was a little anxious, as I don't really like turn-based combat. Also, I thought, the preconceived notion I had in my head was that it was frustrating having to select actions on an Excel spreadsheet right-click menu of a list instead of just performing them yourself. But I guess little baby Snug was just an idiot who hated fun, you stupid idiot baby! The turn-based battles in Final Fantasy VII are really fun. I think what is so great about them is that they're deceptively simple. I mean, mostly every fight could be won by just spamming the fight button until the enemy... But then you've got items, limit breaks, different characters, magic in the form of the highly customizable materia, and suddenly it's just like this giant wormhole of possibilities opened up. Materia, which are these gems with different properties that you find throughout your journey, were so fun to use, and I loved sinking my teeth into the juicy combinations and possibilities. Like some materia can be used to equip a healing spell, or maybe they can let you do ice damage. These really let you customize the game to however you want it to be. You can make dedicated magic users, or dedicated healers, or make everyone just a little bit good at everything. This customizability was so fun, and the more the game went on, I just wanted to grab every single materia I could see and explore its potential. I ended up with a pretty cool system where I would start off every battle with haste and all, and then the time between actions was quicker for my party members. Then I would try and get a regen plus all effect off, so I was constantly healing the whole battle, and it rocked. And getting to this position was important because when you're in battle, you can't just sit around dilly-dally, shilly-shally. No, the enemies attack at the same time as you do, which is so cool. Again, sorry, I don't really play many JRPGs. Before this, I thought turn-based combat meant you made your decision and patiently waited your turn to get pulverized by a fucking goblin or something. This decision to have the fights play out in real time gives each battle intensity and puts your decision making on the fly, which was so fun. And you're going to be tested on that decision making, as some enemies are immune to certain attacks or resistant to others. Some enemies will give you debuffs or effects you gotta quickly cure. You always gotta be on the lookout to heal your team. Some enemies give you weird properties. Did I just turn into a frog? I love this game. Frogs are so cute. They're just like funny little guys. One other really cool thing the game does is that it doesn't show you the enemy's name, level, HP, or any other type of stat really. It really adds to the intensity in fights, especially with tougher enemies when you don't know if your dying party is going to scrape through or if you're fighting a pointless battle. You can use an assess materia that tells you all of those stats, but it comes back to that customizability thing. Do you want to waste a materia slot and a precious action in battle just to see if Scrimblow Bimblow is weak to fire? Do you? Despite spending half the game fighting, the battles are very fun, but if they were the only thing you did in the game, I think it would get quite dull quite quick. You spend the other good chunk of time running around and exploring the world. Depending what's happening in the story and world, you might have to interact with things, such as jumping from area to area, or kicking a key up to yourself, or slapping a woman. This girl has punched metal robots, but now she's just slapping a woman? Huh? The other quarter or so of this game is random minigames, and there are a lot of them, and it's kind of weird. There's chocobo racing, there's a shitty fort defense game, there's inappropriate snowboarding after a tragic story beat. They're all fine, albeit a bit random. Except the highway motorbike Midgar escape sequence, that shit was so cool because at this point the game had only been this, and then suddenly you're being chased on a highway and slashing your sword and killing a mech, and that is why the minigames are here. They add a certain variety and flavor that helps keep the pace from being a slog, even if they hit or miss in quality. And so all in all, this game is fun. Yeah, it's really fun. After 25 years, I still think enough of this game holds up for you to have a good time. But what elevates Final Fantasy VII from a simple good time to something truly special isn't the gameplay. Oh no. It is, without a doubt, the thing that genuinely surprised and impressed me the most in this game was its world and the way in which it presents it. Obviously the game looks old, everyone is a chunky little dude, and the animation wasn't quite done by Pixar. Yet through its brilliant writing and world building and characters and music and everything that falls under the umbrella that is presentation, all of that low quality stuff just fades away as you fall further into this world. You all know I absolutely adore pre-rendered backgrounds, and this game is the king of using them. Every single locale in this world has an immaculate amount of detail, way surpassing what other games at the time could do, whilst also having that juicy and delicious charm that only 90s renders are able to produce. It really may be the driving factor behind what makes this world come to life in the way it does. And what a world. Yeah, it's primitive by today's standards, but I can only imagine what exploring this open world in 1997 felt like. It really feels like an adventure as you run through forest, meadow, and desert, fighting enemies and finding cool secrets. There's charismatic and unique towns for you to visit, such as the mystic Cosmo Canyon, or the relaxing beach town Costa del Sol, or the gorgeously winter-esque snow town of Icicle Inn. And then there's a giant casino in the sky with gambling and low-poly bunny girls, and you can go on an awkward date with your bro. So did you catch the game? What game? I hate sport! Fuck you! One super charming thing about the game I just loved was the variety of enemies. Unlike the previous Final Fantasy games, which followed a more traditional fantasy setting, 7 is more of a near-future sci-fi. So you've got robots and soldiers with guns and things like that. But then, you've just got the most random shit that is never explained, like a giant house? Why am I fighting a house? There's a giant demon wall, there's a boat with a skeleton on the front of it, there's dragons, there's a brain pod, there's Christopher. Hello, Christopher. There's a pyramid. Who made these enemies? It was so funny and cute seeing this game balance realistic, militaristic enemies and weaponry against something wonderfully dumb like a devil motorbike. What the fuck is that? This world, which is filled with so much variety and heart, was such a treat to explore. Again, going to be a broken record here, but you really do forget how primitive the game is, because all the elements are working so well together that it becomes such a pleasant experience. But they're using a hidden trick. The thing that is really tying all these elements together and making them what they are is without a doubt the music in this game is so incredible. It's so good that I genuinely am kind of annoyed at myself for only playing this game now. I definitely would have had half the soundtrack on my iPod Nano in primary school. Nobuo Uematsu delivers a stellar score that is not only super varied, having tracks ranging from intense orchestral showdowns to cheery and relaxing town vibes to everything in between, but the soundtrack also does the game a massive service by doing most of the heavy lifting. Again, there is definitely a charm to these chunky little dudes and these crunchy pre-rendered backgrounds, but they do require a higher than usual suspension of disbelief. But that's not even a thought that crosses your mind when the soundtrack comes in and effortlessly ties the game together into a neat little bow. It is the heart and soul and lemon and lime and flavor and intensity and beauty of this game. I already used it, but fuck it, let me use it again. The opening starts on this slow string that slowly builds and builds up to... and it just instantly delivers to you the pitch that is the epic journey of this game. And then, with 8 chugs of this train, we're going into this energetic and conniving theme, which explodes into the action as we hear the trumpets go. Immediately, it sets the tone and gets you hooked, and that's only in the first 3 minutes. Calm down! In other areas, the music acts as the emotional underpinning of great moments and characters. You've got the instant classic that is Aerith's theme, which becomes a melancholic reminder as you venture further into the story. Tifa's theme sounds homely and familiar, yet there's almost a sad tinge to it. It's like you feel safe, but there's definitely something unsaid being left in the air. The track Anxious Heart fits the title perfectly. It definitely feels like the embodiment of anxiety, but there's almost a serene quality to it. But it's not all gushy, boring, emotional tracks. Ugh, I hate my feelings! There are just some really fun and quirky tracks here too, which I love. Nothing feels as chill as the background to Costa del Sol. And then you've got this groovy bass and synth for the Chocobo theme. And there's something kind of cute and charming about Fort Condor's militaristic march. It's almost remarkable how a score full of these fun little tunes like those can exist in the same space as There are a lot of fights in this game, and they would not be anywhere near as fun if it wasn't fueled by this battle theme. Genuinely a masterpiece of a track. Not only does it sell the intensity found both within the immediate battle and the stakes of the greater story, but it never gets old. Ever! How do you write something that doesn't get old? Did you put fucking magic into my ears? What? But then, you get a track like those chosen by the planet, which feels so eerie and horrifying and instantly vaporizes the tone into one of terror. I think my favorite thing about it is that it accompanies Sephiroth throughout the game. You get this one small melody that you kind of associate with him as his theme, which of course gets blown to shred when we hear One Winged Angel really is worth the hype. If you know nothing about this game like I did, you at least probably know Cloud and Sephiroth, with the latter being paired with this track. It starts off with this terrifying march which quickly turns into frightening waves of strings and horns which then hits us with I can only imagine playing this for the first time in the 90s. Every game before it sounded like shitty beeps and boops, and then suddenly you're hit with these digitized vocals of a gothic Latin lyric choir. It is such a unique and brilliant composition for a video game villain, and it's so iconic. That's what this soundtrack feels like. Even upon hearing these tracks for the first time, I could tell they were something special. The compositions themselves are not only so good, but it's how they elevate the game around it. Whether they are getting you through an intense boss fight, or breaking your heart, or pushing you to explore a brand new world, this score is the icing on the cake that makes the game work. But it isn't perfect. Despite being on a CD, which was capable of holding recordings of real instruments doing real songs, the sound font of FF7 is a little, not real. I think it has a charming sound to it, but you do sort of get the impression with some songs that they would be greater if recorded live. But then again, the tracks are constructed so well that you kind of forget that they're not real instruments. And when they are this good at combining with the world, characters, and story to make the game what it is, who cares? The luscious music, the gorgeously crunchy pre-rendered backgrounds, the abundance of chunky little dudes everywhere, oh my god, they're so chunky and I love them! All of these things combine in a flawless fusion that I can't believe didn't set everyone's PS1 on fire. Oh god, But when you pair all those elements together and use them as the backdrop for the narrative, that's when things get special. The world of Final Fantasy VII is dark, grimy, and oppressive. The majority of its residents live within the city of Midgar, built by the electrical power company Shinra, who have gotten so big and collected so much influence that they've essentially become the police and government. The planet is fueled by an energy called Mako, which Shinra sucks up and turns into power for the people to use. Slowly but surely, the planet is dying. mega corporations, profits over the future of the planet, a wealthy elite hoarding and defending their riches and status. I don't know how it resonated back in 1997, I was bailing my dad's ballsack, but in the modern day, the depressing world of Final Fantasy VII acts as a grim peek forward at our very own possible bleak future. But that's where we come in. You play as an ex-soldier of Shinra, Cloud Strive, who is helping a bunch of eco-terrorists known as Avalanche to blow up one of Midgar's main reactors. While Cloud is clearly in it just for the money, we can see the ragtag group of rebels, including one lovable Barrett, are full of hope and optimism that combats their hatred for Shinra's deeds. And in this first hour, you're killing guards, sneaking into facilities, fighting a giant mech, blowing up a giant reactor, and making it home just in time for dinner. And then we run back through the trashed slums to a bar called Seventh Heaven. And it is here we meet our childhood friend Tifa. Most games from this era, or at least the ones I was obsessed with, had you play as a blank slate insert character. And while you can still roleplay in this Japanese role-playing game through dialogue selections, it's so much more gripping and engaging to have a character to latch onto. Having a childhood friend, and thus a backstory, sets up so many interesting plot points to be explored later on, but at the beginning it makes you curious about what came before the opening of the game. Like this gorgeous cliche cutscene between Cloud and Tifa, where she asks for him to be her hero and to come save her if she's ever in trouble. Anyways, one failed mission later and Cloud falls 50,000 feet into a pool of flowers. And here we meet Aerith. This is such a gorgeous introduction to her character. An orphan girl who we soon find out is the last member of an ancient race called the Ancients. Yeah, we'll work on the name. We spend a lot of time with Aerith just getting to know her, and by the time we meet up with the rest of the gang, all chaos is breaking loose as Shinra is preparing to drop a plate, one of these big things on top of a city, killing thousands and thousands just to stop our small resistance group. And that's one of the great things about FF7. Its pacing is just so well executed that it keeps you engaged and moving on from giant set piece to set piece. One second you're blowing up a reactor, then you're fighting a giant mech, then you're putting Cloud into a dress to sneak into a mansion, and then you're sneaking into Shinra HQ to rescue Aerith from being forced to mate with a dog in this genuinely disgusting scene.
Don't tell me they're gonna do what I think they're gonna do.
And then you're introduced to the game's villain. Just 5 seconds ago, these halls were full of bubbly Shinra employees. Now, they remain hollow and empty, having nothing but this haunting trail of blood you dare follow. At the top of the building, where once sat the arrogant and gluttonous mayor, now lays his corpse impaled by a giant sword. Who did this? How were they able to get past the security so easily? Where are they now? We don't get the time to think as the guards are back and we've got to run for it. You grab a dumb small car, jump on a motorbike and make your way out of the city. At the edge of the road, the characters bid adieu to Midgar and begin their adventure proper. I mean, come on! In the first 5 hours, we get introduced to this grippingly detailed world full of interesting and intriguing characters, an overarching villainous force, and a mysterious foe we had to track down and confront. That is just in the first 5 hours. Now we have a gigantic open world to explore, and it's just so good! From this point forward, the story mainly focuses on 2 things. The first being Sephiroth, the mysterious man whose trail of blood we just followed. For a hot minute, we never actually see or meet him. Instead, we're just told things about him. How powerful he is, how scary he is. To get to the Mithril mine, we have to go through all this effort to lure and ride a chocobo just to avoid this powerful snake creature that wipes out the entire party. But when we return at a later point, this horrifying creature's defeated corpse is posed almost as if it was a trophy. Sephiroth gets treated like a folklore legend in this game, which builds him up in your mind as this horrible threat all before you ever even see him. And it's so fascinating and so intimidating. And then during a flashback of Cloud's years prior, we have Sephiroth in the party and whoa! His HP is insanely high and his damage output is kinda cooked and we're supposed to go after him? Huh? And this is the other main thing the story focuses on, Cloud's past, which often interweaves with Sephiroth's. After reaching the town of Calm, we get what is maybe the most important flashback in the game. Cloud, who has now become a first-class soldier, visits his hometown again for the first time in years, but something doesn't feel quite right. Tifa, your childhood friend / potential love interest, doesn't seem to care that you're back home. She hardly even recognizes you. The 3 of them take a picture together, then climb a mountain where Sephiroth goes rogue and the 2 duel. But the story begins to not make sense. Things contradict or don't line up with what someone else said, and at some point into the game you realize Cloud is an unreliable narrator. Is what we're seeing and being told what actually happened? Is Cloud lying? Why would he do that? Is Tifa lying? It's such a genius choice because it really makes you start to second guess everything. Mix that in with Cloud's frequent mental outbreaks and you begin to experience a story that's mystery is as compelling as its destination. And then while you're trying to wrap your brain around all of that, Sephiroth goes, Aerith, no! This was the only thing I knew about this game's story. I could barely tell you the name of any of the characters, but I knew one of them was Aerith and that she gets killed by Sephiroth. Yet, even knowing it in advance, it's still a shocking event that is used to give us a beautiful moment to explore how it feels when a life is ended short. And then at our character's lowest hour, when everything is looking grim and awful, Sephiroth comes back and says, "Hey sweetie, nothing you remember is real, okay bye." What? So that important flashback that we experienced earlier, none of it was real. Cloud wasn't even there. He was some other guy with black hair called Zack. Seeing this photograph that we, the player, took place in being a different character is genuinely shocking. What is this? Was Cloud even there at all? Is Cloud even real? Why didn't Tifa say something? What is going on? And then, just to rub it in, Sephiroth summons a meteor which will eventually crash and destroy the planet. Great! This section of the story hit me like a truck. I was so enthralled in my confusion and was so angry at Tifa, and that's what this game does so well. The second half of the game is about discovering who Cloud is and stopping Sephiroth. There's like an explosion from a giant mech, but that doesn't really matter because it leads to Tifa entering Cloud's mind and we begin to find out the truth. The two of them being stereotypical childhood friends? Well, that cliche is turned on its head and beat into a fucking pulp. We find out that they weren't even friends at all. Tifa was the popular girl and Cloud was just an angsty outcast, yet he always thought of her. Cloud never made it to be a soldier, he failed. Instead, he just became a regular grunt, and then quite embarrassingly, he had to accompany Sephiroth and Zack to his hometown. He's too ashamed to reveal his identity to anyone, and follows like a good foot soldier. That is, until Sephiroth goes mad and something kicks in. At the last second, he confronts Sephiroth, throwing him into a pit, killing him and rescuing Tifa. The promise Cloud made to Tifa, that he'd come save her whenever she was in trouble, he never forgot it. This entire section is so beautifully constructed and handled. As the player, we have to move through these fragments of Cloud's mind and try to stitch it all back together. And upon doing so, we feel this gorgeous moment between two friends. And now Cloud, while not perfect, has a better idea of who he is and can begin to try and stop Sephiroth from destroying the planet. I just can't emphasize enough how well the mystery of Cloud is executed. A quarter of a century later and it had me gripped to my controller, ass to the edge of my seat, eyes flat against the screen waiting to see what happened next. It feels satisfying and it makes the relationship between Tifa and Cloud feel unique and special and not just another run-of-the-mill trope. Later on, the two engage in conversation under your airship and she says, "Words aren't the only thing that tell people what you're thinking." It fades to black, they maybe fuck, maybe? And then we see them holding each other under the stars. Because of everything we went through, this scene feels so well earned, yet still intimate and beautiful, and isn't this a fucking PS1 game? How did they do that? The story is full of great emotional moments like this, and you've got one for maybe every single character that packs a surprising amount of punch. But it all comes to conclusion in the ending where they all travel to the planet's core and give a last-ditch effort to fuck Sephiroth off and save the world. We finally kill him, but upon our escape, Cloud has one last personal mission. He travels into what seems like his own mind, and there we have one final duel with the one-winged angel himself. He does a very cool set of slashes, but the most important thing in this scene is the imagery of Cloud erasing this plague from his brain and finally being free. Wow. For a 25-year-old game, it just astounds me that it was able to deliver something like this. It's got themes and nuance and character arcs and a rich world, and isn't this the same console with Tony Hawk on it? What? Incredible! The story does have problems, however. It opens on this David vs Goliath shot of Cloud taking on Shinra, but as you get more into the story, it feels like Shinra kind of disappear into the background. I mean, these four operatives occasionally bump into you, and then Rufus, the head of the company, gets blown up and it's like, oh, I forgot he was in this game at all. There are a lot of weird story beats in here too. Like Kate Sith is a character you meet who then turns out to be a traitor, and then the gang just forgives him and it's never brought up again. Okay. And speaking of, there's a couple of optional side characters in the game that you can get, but if you don't do their optional side quests, they kinda just hang around and don't say anything. Which I know is kinda my fault for not doing their content, but I would still like for Vincent to have a line of dialogue in the main story. And speaking of the dirge, maybe one of the most important cutscenes in the game, a collection of scenes that explores what happened to Cloud and Zack between their scuffle with Sephiroth and the beginning of the game, showing how Zack died and how Cloud and his mental illusions began. A vital part of the story is an optional cutscene you find by randomly walking past Vincent's bedroom in a dungeon. Why would you do that? And my other major complaint is that Aerith's death feels forgotten about 5 minutes after it happens. It's a tragic moment in the story that really shatters Cloud and the gang. And then you go snowboarding. Oh yeah? And Aerith is only ever mentioned or brought up again like 3 times. Towards the end of the game, I almost forgot she was a part of it at all, which I feel is something I shouldn't be thinking. And if I'm going to be honest, Aerith in general, I just... people always say, ooh, who should Cloud end up with, Tifa or Aerith? And the answer is obviously Tifa, because in this game, Aerith feels really immature and a little annoying. I got secondhand embarrassment on so many occasions when she would just randomly bring up, hey Cloud, we should be a couple in the worst situation. We're trying to stop a nicely shampooed madman! I should probably say now that I have played Final Fantasy VII Remake, and I think that game's biggest accomplishment is how it recreates and redefines these characters and gives them all so much more depth and love. Especially Aerith, who was just perfect in that reimagining. It makes coming back to this game a little hard because the characters feel a lot shallower in comparison. But who the fuck knows what they're doing with that spaghetti timeline fate destroying story shit in that version, so I don't know, we'll just have to wait and see. But overall, even with a few hiccups, I really think the world, characters, and the narrative all combine to make FF7 something truly special, and something I think everyone should play. Even if it's just the first 5-hour section in Midgar, I really can't think of a game since that feels like anything like Oh, it's the telephone. Hello? What does this game not do well? That's what you called about? I haven't heard from you in 6 months. I mean, I would have at least liked to how are you? Going into this game, the best review I read was by a guy on Steam called Zach, who said, pros, PS1 Classic, cons, PS1 Classic. Truer words have yet to be spoken. What used to intimidate me so much as a kid with open world or JRPGs like this was the fear of being lost and not knowing where to go. It's not that I'm not the curious type, but I just always want to go to what's next. I get so invested in the story and events that whenever I have to spend time just walking around looking for anything, it just gets so frustrating. Where am I going? The great news about Final Fantasy VII is that you don't need a guide to know where to go. For the first 5 hours. Midgar works so brilliantly because whilst it is limited, you can run around and inspect every nook and cranny and find secrets while still also having a general idea of what direction you need to go in. But when you get out into the overworld, good luck, you're on your own, see ya! The first couple of towns you visit will kind of hint at where you should go next, but I feel right after you leave Cosmo Canyon, the game just kind of stops telling you anything. It got to a point where I just wander around for ages looking for any sort of clue for where I should be going. Or I'd fear I was in the right town, but I didn't talk to the right NPC or talk to the right NPC in the specific way the game wanted me to. At one point in the story, Aerith leaves for the Forgotten City, but the game doesn't really tell you where that is, and I had absolutely no idea where to go. So I did the smart thing. I mustered up the energy of all 3 of my brain cells and came up with a plan of going back to the only person in the world who knows anything about the planet or ancients and asking them where to go. So I made the long trek back all the way to Cosmo Canyon to see this floating grandpa, and he says, what? It's just so frustrating figuring out where to go.
But Snack Boy, why is it such a big deal? Be patient, you little twit.
Okay, first off, ouch. Second off, it wouldn't be that major of a problem if this game didn't have random I know this was just the staple of the genre back then, but this is such a frustrating mechanic. When you are in a semi-linear area, or you know where you need to go, random encounters work great. They mix up your long walk with a bit of action whilst also upgrading your party members. Great, fantastic, I love it. But the second you're unsure where to go or how to solve a puzzle, being interrupted every 5 seconds is so indescribably frustrating. On the overworld, it makes you grumpy that you don't know where to go, and in a smaller area, it feels like the game is punishing your curiosity for exploration. And what's weirder is that this game is kind of easy, so if you didn't know where to go and spent hours and hours just looking for the next bit, you'd be so overleveled come game's end. I mean, maybe having the encounters be so frequent was a deliberate choice, so that when you unlock an airship late into the game, it feels empowering. Still fucking sucked though. So my biggest piece of advice to any new players is that you should try Final Fantasy VII up until you start getting routinely lost, and then start using a guide. This game became immensely more enjoyable to me once I knew where to go after each story beat. I still got to figure out puzzles and fight enemies by myself, but just knowing where the next bit of the story was made the game more fun and kept the pacing consistent and engaging. There were so many areas and sections later on in the game where I felt so glad I had a guide because I knew I would have got stumped for hours and hours. Like genuinely, how did people find the key to the lost temple underwater? Like, not trying to be rhetorical or snarky, like if you did that as a kid, genuinely tell me how. Well, that is the major issue with the game. There are a few other tiny PS1 era things that hold it back from aging flawlessly. It's very frustrating how items only tell you what they do out of battle. Like if I'm poisoned and I need the item that cures me, I just have to remember which one does that. And the items' names don't always logically line up with their function. Like how was I ever supposed to guess that my silence would be cured by an echo screen? What the fuck is an echo screen? And it's very weird that you can't save at any time. At the end of the game, they give you an item that lets you drop a save point down, and it's like, why couldn't I have had that the entire game? Hell, why couldn't I just save in the menu the whole game? I'm sure there was some PS1 technical limitation reason for why, but it is frustrating. Especially when you're ready to finish for the night and you arrive at the gold saucer and you gotta spend their magical fucking gold saucer dollars. Just let me save! I just want to go to sleep, please. But apart from those things, this game is still really enjoyable. 25 years later, which is just incredible and such a mammoth achievement. Video games age worse than cheese sitting on a kitchen bench under the fucking sun. So the fact that this game is still wildly enjoyable and engrossing and compelling a quarter of a century later is insane. 25 years later, should you play Final Fantasy VII? Yes! It not only was such a cultural mammoth upon release, but also resonates strongly in our current landscape. The entire time I played it, I almost got really sad that we'll never see this version of the game remade. FF7 Remake is a whole other testament of skill and quality, but with how drastically different that game is, both with its gameplay and also with its story being stretched thinner than a piece of paper, I just feel it's a little bit of a shame that we won't get this PS1 classic reimagined with a greater visual aesthetic and menus that don't cause me horrendous pain. But tell me what you think down in the comments below. Don't mail me a letter, that would be stupid. I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on the game, or a 10,000 word essay on why I'm wrong and stupid. That would be great. Please have yourselves a fantastic day and stay snug. See ya.